The most exciting announcement of this year's Adobe Max has to be the release of Photoshop for iPad app. To show you what's possible with it and to get you excited about trying it out yourself, I recorded a full design process creating a fan art poster for the amazing Joker movie. To keep this video interactive, I also made a Milanote board for you to be able to follow along with the same images I will be working with. You can find a link to this board in the description below. Also, before we start, I just wanted to thank you all for supporting our channel, and to celebrate reaching 200,000 subscribers, we are giving away 200 free courses. Watch the video to find out more about this. So here we are in Photoshop for iPad. I'm going to start with a new document, and I will set this up as an A4 portrait size with 300 ppi resolution. Settings are very similar to how I would start a document on the desktop, and I'm just going to click on Create. Now it starts with a blank document, and we can see here on the right side there's a couple of different ways of setting up the panels. First of all, we can see them in this compact view, or we can see them in more extended view. This is what I'm going to use. And also we have the layer properties, which is a separate panel, which I also prefer to have open. Now that we have our fresh new document, the first thing I'm going to do is to bring in some of the images. All of these you can find on the Milanote board. It's in the description below, and you can do a composition yourself while you follow along. So I'm going to choose the camera roll in this case, and I'm going to go to the images I prepared. So first of all, the main hero image is this one. I place it in, and then I can resize it simply just by using gestures. Something like that for now will be fine. So I click done. Now this is our first layer. We can see it already here on the top. I can tap to turn it off, turn it back on. Let's bring in the other images as well. So we will need these extra two poses. So there's this one, which I really like. I'm going to just place that in, and then one more again from the camera roll. And this is the other one that I'm going to use. So now that we have all these three images, I'm going to turn them off temporarily, and I will work on the central image. Now, first of all, let's get rid of the original background. And for this, I'm going to use a selection and a mask. So luckily we can create both clipping masks and layer masks. Currently, there's no vector mask option, but this is already quite good. If I double tap on the selection tool, I can see there's 4 selection methods that currently we have. The freeform lasso tool, the quick selection tool, and the 2 marquee tools. So if I use the quick selection tool, it actually works very similarly to how it would work on the desktop. So I can just paint over details, and you can see it's going to find more or less the outlines. Of course, we can also remove from the selection, and that is by using this little touch shortcut here on the left. If I press and hold it with my left hand, I can start removing, because that's like holding down the Alt key on the keyboard. So I can refine my selection like this, and again holding it down, I can remove from it, so subtract from the selection, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm going to deselect this, but instead of using the quick selection tool, I prefer to work with the lasso tool. Now, in the desktop version, I would use the pen tool and create a vector mask, but something very similar is what we can do here with the lasso tool. So I'm going to quickly make a rough selection of Joker, and I am going to turn this already into a mask. So the majority of the background will be gone. So we just have to click here on the mask icon on the right, and that's already better. Now we can zoom closer, and still using the lasso tool, I am going to make a very quick selection here of this edge. Let's just go up and continue along the edge, something like that. Then switch to the fill tool or the paint bucket tool, and make sure you have black as the foreground color. You can just swipe over them to switch between black and white, which is quite nice. I like that quick way of changing it, and then make sure that the mask is already created, which you can see here on the right side. So that little black and white square is your mask, which I can just also hide and show with the icon here on the right. So while the mask is selected and we have this selection, I'm going to use the fill bucket tool, tap twice on this selection, and then choose deselect. Now, the reason I use it twice, or tap it twice, because it leaves a little bit of anti-alias edge at the first time, but the second time it completely fills everything. So let's just try this again. Using the lasso tool, I'm going to actually paint over or draw over this edge one more time. Okay, so just a quick selection there. Then using the paint bucket, tap twice. Just show you that if I only tap once, that's the anti-alias edge that we can see there, and then I can get rid of that. Now, there is no option to turn off anti-alias at this point, only a feather, but the feather is set to 0 pixels, so I don't really have to worry about that. And I'm going to just tap on deselect, and then I would literally continue doing the same thing. So I'm going to draw maybe another section here just so you can see it. I can start drawing over this section and then go up, make a selection, and use the paint bucket tool, tap once, twice, deselect. So as you can see, this is a fairly quick and easy way to create very nice refined edges or masks. And the mask is obviously non-destructive, which means that we can always bring back details or hide more of them if we need to. If you want to see your mask, you can double tap on it. So that's going to show you the black and white image where white shows, black hides. That's the same way how masks works in the desktop version of Photoshop. Now, I'm not going to spend more time on showing you how to do these clean edges, but I will show you what I would do around the hair, because that's soft edge compared to the hard edges around the suit. So what I'm going to do is to switch to the brush tool. And if you double tap on the brush tool, you can also switch to different brush tips. So the one that I like to use for hair, I found this one, the natural edge, to be quite good. So with this one, when I start painting still on the mask with black color, it creates more like painterly edge, almost like has a little bit of texture to it. And I think this works quite well with hair. So if I start painting around the edge here, I'm just going to paint over it with a smaller size. So I'm going to reduce the size here on the left, just simply drag it down. And then you can see that it creates a little bit more rough edge, which I think works quite well for hair. So obviously these parts here would be more difficult, but even these I think can be selected quickly just by painting over it. So soft edges, I would use the brush tool, and I'm using an Apple Pencil on an iPad Pro. This, by the way, is the 2018 iPad Pro. I find drawing on the iPad the best drawing experience. So that's amazing to be able to use Photoshop on the iPad and have this drawing experience that I'm used to. So once again, for soft edges like hair, I would use the brush tool. And for hard edges, I would use a combination of the lasso tool and the paint bucket tool. Okay, so we jumped ahead a bit and we have the 3 masks ready for all the 3 poses. So if I select any of these, I can still show how it looks with the background by using this icon here on the right. Again, this one as well, we can see nothing is lost at this point. So we have still everything, all the details on the layers. We just hid them with the layer masks. There's one thing I really miss in the current version of Photoshop for iPad, and that is smart objects. So at this point, before resizing and rotating these layers, what I would do is to turn them into smart objects if I were on the desktop version. But unfortunately here we don't have them yet. I know it is coming or planned to be introduced later on. So in a future update, we hopefully soon we will get it. But at this moment, we will have to keep on working like this. And the reason why I'm really missing smart objects is because by resizing and rotating these layers, I know I'm losing some quality. So I'm a bit more careful but I already know the composition, what I need to do. So I can just simply use the move tool or select tool, and I can move these layers around. So I'm going to put this one here on the left. I'm going to move this one here slightly down to somewhere around here. I think that's roughly the composition I used before. Just going to zoom out a bit and see if we need to move a little bit everything down. I think it's roughly in the right position. I'm going to select all 3 layers. When you drag right on the layers, you can select them all. And then using the move tool, now we can move them together. But also we can resize them with the second tool. So I just go back. The second one from the top is the free transform tool, with which we can resize the whole thing a bit. I think something slightly even smaller will work for this poster. Yeah, something like that. So I'm going to click on done, and then now we can start adding some shapes. For this, I'm going to create a new layer. So tap the little plus sign here, and then on this layer again, I'm going to use the lasso tool, and with the lasso tool, we will draw the shape that we need. So I'm just going to try to draw it similarly to what I've done before. Let's try this again. Yeah, something like that, like a bean shape. And I am going to fill this with a color. Now, for the color, I'm going to pick a color from the image for now. It doesn't really matter, we can change it later. That's going to be fine. I'm going to deselect this now, and I will move this layer further down. I think I have it somewhere around here. So just simply change the stacking order, and then we can move this slightly down. Yeah, somewhere around there. Now, the first thing that I wanted to do here is to create depth. And we already have an indication of that by having this character here behind the shape, while the other 2 characters are in front. To make this more interesting, the character on the right, so this one, I would like to have that clipped into this shape. So all we have to do for that is to create a selection of the shape. So we can do that from going into the menu and choose load as selection. So that creates a selection based on the shape. This would be Command or Control click on the layer's thumbnail on the desktop version, but it's pretty much the same thing here. And then after this, I go into the layer on the right, select the mask, and I am going to invert the selection. Here at the bottom, we can tap on invert. So now everything is selected but the shape. And now we can use the brush tool, maybe make it a little bit bigger, and just paint over around the edge. Now I'm going to change my brush back to the normal hard round brush. And then we can just get rid of all of that. So we are masking out those details, and this helps to make it look like the character on the right is standing within this shape. So we can now choose deselect, and I think we can move the main character down a bit. Yeah, something like that is more similar to the way I've created before. Now, I would like to place a scene into this shape. So for that, I'm going to bring in another image. So going into my album, this scene I think is a very recognizable scene from the movie. I'm going to just make it a bit smaller, something like that. Tap done. And then I'm going to place it just above the shape. So let's just drag this down just above the shape. And then this is the icon here on the right to create a clipping mask. So I can turn it off, turn it back on. And what I want to do is to have Joker visible on the left, but I also want to see the guy on the right. So they were quite important in the whole story. So I want to make sure that they are both visible. And it's a quite nice way of having 2 interesting details within the same shape, but then have the characters in the middle divide the composition. But I don't want this to be too strong, so I don't want it to be in its original colors. I would like to use a gradient on it. So first of all, what we can do is using these properties here, the layer properties, having this layer selected, I can change already the blend mode. Maybe I can change it to overlay. Now, this is going to mix the colors of this layer with the colors of the shape, which could work really well. And at this point, I can select the layer itself and use a clipped adjustment, so to change the colors. Remember, I said the original colors doesn't really matter because I'm going to change it anyway. So add clipped adjustment here in the layer properties and then choose hue saturation. Now notice that there's only a limited amount of adjustment layers here, not as many as what you would get on the desktop, but most of them are here. One thing I'm really missing is the curves, but hopefully that will be added soon as well. For now, I'm just going to click on hue saturation, and with this I can start to change the hue. So you can see already we can experiment with different colors, and I think I'm going to go with something along the lines of that. Now, at this point also, I'm going to change the background color. I like to already set that up in the beginning. So I'm going to use the paint bucket tool again. I'm going to tap on the background, and I will actually change this to something a bit more purple. And I think it needs to be a little bit more desaturated, maybe brighter. Yeah, I think that's quite nice. So what we need to make sure is that this shape is darker. So just go back to the shape and reduce the lightness. But also what I'm going to do is to reduce the opacity of the image. So the image doesn't have to be so strong, and maybe even set it to soft light. Okay, something like that. Maybe reduce or increase the opacity a bit. But then what we can also do is to add another layer, just an empty layer. This can be on top of the adjustment layer, can even be above the image. It doesn't really matter. At this point, maybe I can just put it above. And I'm going to use the brush tool, and reducing this hardness, you can see we can create a very soft edge for this brush, make the brush size quite big, something like that. Now we can start introducing different colors. So all I have to do is to switch to a different color, maybe orange, and start painting over. Now it's too strong at the moment. We can reduce the opacity with this slider here. Just going to go down and then paint over it. That's quite nice, something like that on the top. Then we can make the color darker, something like this. With that, we can paint around the edges, and that already starts to create a bit more contrast. We can also introduce maybe darker purples around the edge, maybe a bit bigger, yeah, something like that. So for now, I'm going to just keep it at that. And we can already see how this is working, but I want to also change the colors on the Joker characters. Before we continue, I just wanted to let you know about our creative membership program. For a small monthly fee, you get access to over 200 hours of Adobe certified online training courses. Master all the tools and skills needed to become a professional graphic designer or illustrator. As a pro member, you will get mentoring from me and my team, access to webinars, student forum, and creative briefs to help you build an outstanding portfolio. Pro members can also download the project files for all of our YouTube tutorials. Sign up at yesimadesigner.com/memberships and start your free trial today. And now let's head back to the tutorial. I'm going to do the one on the left first. I will select that layer. It's this one here on the left. So I'm going to create a new layer on top of that, and I'm going to clip it. So I'm going to use the clipping option. And whenever you see the little arrow on the thumbnail, that's when it means it's clipped onto it. So now that it is clipped, we can use, instead of the fill color or the paint bucket, we can switch to the gradient tool. And this is quite handy that we have it here, because with this we can create gradients, and it's going to create a gradient between the two colors, so your foreground and background color. And you can just paint over it and it will recognize the direction, and you can very quickly set it up to whatever you want. I'm going to use a different color, maybe use something like this. Okay, that's more interesting. And then just reduce the opacity, because I also want these to be a bit more faded. So I don't want them to be so high contrast. So something like this actually works quite well. But then we can also combine effects. So we can create a duplicate of this layer. From the extra options, we can choose duplicate layer. Notice that this is automatically set up as a clipping layer again. And I'm going to choose multiply for this and maybe just reduce the opacity a bit. So that is quite good. Now, what we can also do is to add a mask on these gradients. So for example, if I want the face to be a bit more visible, I can tap on the mask icon, and then using the brush tool, we can paint over the face, maybe with a bit smaller brush size, something like that. Actually, let's just make the opacity and size bigger. Yeah, so notice how we can lift details and show the face a bit more, because I think that's quite important still. Yeah, something like that. It doesn't need to stand out that much. Now, once again, I would do the same thing on all of the images. The one in the middle, I would keep almost with its original colors. For that, maybe I would just use an adjustment layer. So I would go into add clipped adjustment, use most likely hue saturation. But another cool one is color balance. I'm just going to show you how it works. So with color balance, you can start adjusting these 3 sliders. And once again, this is very similar to how you would do this in Photoshop. So it works exactly the same way. You can turn off the luminosity option or turn it back on. That just helps to keep the same tonal values. And I think this already looks quite interesting. So if we turn off this adjustment layer, that was the original colors, and this is the new colors. So it's almost like adding a bit of tint to the layer. So I would continue adding effects like this. But another thing that I would do at this point already is start to organize my layers. So I would have separate groups for everything. And this is the main composition. So for this, we can just select all these layers. So I can hold down the little touch shortcut here on the left and just tap on all of the layers here apart from the background layer. And then I am going to click on the little group icon here on the right. So create a layer group, and we can call it Jokers. Now, another important shape that we have to create is that ring or circle. For that, I'm going to again create a new layer, just a simple empty layer, and then use the elliptical marquee selection tool. Holding down the touch shortcut, I can click and drag to create the circle. Roughly around that size will work. Now, after you created the circle, you can fill this in with a color. Again, doesn't really matter what color. So I'm just going to use the paint bucket tool, tap on it. And then what we will do is to click on the more options. And I really like the fact that they have this. There is the transform selection option here. And then simply pinch somewhere in the center of this selection. And with this, you can create the ring. Yeah, something like that. Tap done on the top right and then hit erase. So that's how quick and easy it was to create this ring. You can use the selection tool and move this in place. So I think it needs to be somewhere around here. Maybe we can use the free transform tool, make it slightly smaller. And I think that's going to work. Now I'm going to already add to this adjustment layer. So add clip adjustment, and I'm going to use hue saturation. Let's just increase the brightness a bit. I'm going to change the color. I use the bright yellow. Yeah, something like that. For now, it's going to work. And I'm going to use the mask option. So add a layer mask on this. Using the brush tool, I'm going to set my opacity up and also the hardness all the way up. And then let's just test this brush out. Yeah, that's going to work. Now, when you are using the brush, obviously you can just paint over it. And then with this, you can make it look like certain details are in front or behind the circle. But to make it even easier, because we already have these selections saved as masks, all we have to do is to find them. Like with the main Joker character in the middle, I can select that mask and then go into the extra options and choose load as selection. Once we have that there, we can go back into the mask of our ring. And then if I were to paint over here, you see immediately it just deletes exactly the details from the arm. And this makes it look like the arm is in front of the ring. Also, we want the head to be in front of it, so we can just very quickly paint over that. And I will keep the other arm behind the ring to create this nice interaction between the ring and the character. But then I am going to make another selection now. So I would like to make sure that we have the other Joker selected now. So I do the same technique. So load as selection, and I think that's it. Yeah, load the selection. Now we go back up here, and also I want to make sure that we can see him properly. And then I would like to make sure that the ring goes behind this other shape. So I could also move the whole thing behind everything, but then I won't be able to create these interactions. So that's why I prefer to do this on top. Anything that I create as an interlocking shape, I like to keep on top and instead just use these masks. So what I'm going to do is, similarly to what I've done with the Joker characters, I select that shape, the bean shape, and I'm going to load that as a selection, then go back to the mask and just quickly paint over this thing here. So now what we need to do is to select the other Joker character on the left. So load that as a selection, go up, paint over him, so he's also in front, and then I want this also to be behind the central character. So once again, I just load that as a selection and make sure I'm on the right layer, start painting, and so we have the interlocking shape created. We started adding some adjustments. Now notice that there is one issue with this selection in the middle, that the shoes are obviously not completely visible, and that is because he was standing on stairs. Now the quickest way to fix this would be to actually paint in those details. So I'm going to create a new layer quickly, and I'm going to use the brush tool. If you use the touch shortcut and then drag to the side, it will become the eyedropper tool. So we can very quickly pick a color and then start painting. So I'm just going to go a little bit closer, make the brush size smaller as well. And in the settings, I will make sure we have the pressure set and maybe also a bit of smoothing. So when I'm painting, it looks like this. One thing for drawing that I'm really missing is the ability to rotate the screen, rotate the view. That's also something that they plan to add later, so that I'm really looking forward to that. I'm just going to put this actually on top, and then that way we can paint over it and blend it a little bit better. Okay, so this is just going to be a very rough drawing, just so I can show you how I imagine having this quick fix. You already see that that shoe looks quite good already. And then the other one, we have to do a little bit more work here. So I'm just using the brush. Then again, touch shortcut, pick this color, and then paint. Yeah, something like that. Now you could also use the clone stamp tool for this, but I just feel like I'm faster working with the brush tool. So try to imagine how this would look like. Probably a bit further out here, and then that needs to come out as well a bit more. Okay, so I'm not going to waste too much time on this. For now, I'm going to be just wrapping it up around somewhere around there. Also, if you hold down the touch shortcut while you are painting, that temporarily turns into the eraser, which is really handy. So you can paint and then erase with the same tool. Okay, so let's see without and with this layer. I think it looks quite good. And I want to make Joker look like he's floating in space, so almost like he jumped up. So I'm going to create another layer at the bottom, and I will use the lasso tool and just draw very quickly something like that. fill that in actually on a separate layer. I forgot to do that. So on a separate layer, fill that in with a color, then deselect, and then we are going to use this additional options here. At the moment, we only have two filters here, Gaussian blur and invert. So invert will just invert the color, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted Gaussian blur. So I'm going to create this very soft shadow because he's up in the air, so it shouldn't be too harsh, the edges of this shadow. And I'm going to, around there is fine. I can adjust the blur, obviously. I'm just going to keep it around 70. Hit done, and I use the free transform tool and just squeeze this together a bit, make it a bit more flat, drag it down, and then reduce the opacity in the blending options. So there you go, that looks quite good already. Maybe one additional thing is to set this to multiply. I think it will blend with the background a bit better. Doesn't make much difference, but it's still, I think, looks slightly better. Now, of course, I can always tweak this further, but for now, I think this will work. As I mentioned earlier, we are giving away 200 courses for free. This is for our latest course teaching you the ins and outs and creative techniques with Photoshop for iPad. The course is still a work in progress, so the first 200 viewers taking our offer will get early access to it and get to watch the contents weeks before others. Since Photoshop for iPad is a fresh release, we can expect a lot of new features coming out for it soon. And we are planning to continuously update the course. If you're lucky, you can still claim a free course for yourself by clicking on the link in the description below to the Milanote board. Now, of course, we can always check how the whole thing looks on different backgrounds. So we can create a new duplicate of the background layer, and then we can fill it in maybe with a darker color. It looks quite nice with dark as well, but I like to have several backgrounds, and then I like to experiment with that while I'm working on the design. Now, going back to the ring, there's an additional thing I wanted to do there as well. I'm going to select the ring, create a new layer, and this is already clipped onto the ring. So I'm going to use the brush tool, and with the brush tool we will pick the original color, but then I'm going to change that color and make it darker, make the edges soft, make the size slightly bigger, and the opacity also I'm going to keep low. Okay. I really like this little selector here on the left. With my left hand, I can very quickly adjust it. And of course, if you are left-handed and you draw with the left hand, then you can move that little selector to the right side. So you can customize the location of it. But what I'm going to do here is to simply paint over this. Having the layer on top of the adjustment will work better. Let's make the size of the brush bigger. So what I'm doing here, you will see, I'm just adding a little bit of shading with multiply adjustment layer. I think it works better. So I can create a bit of shading around these parts. So make it look like there is some shadow, cast shadow around the ring. Okay, it's just very quickly. I'm not going to waste too much time. Here as well. There. Okay, so without and with, just a subtle little addition there. Now, of course, if you feel like it's a bit too much, you can always reduce the opacity because once again, this is completely non-destructive. It's on a separate layer. One thing that I find not that good at this point is that we have here a very strange thing. I'm going to show you. I would call this a tangent. So this point here. The problem with this is that we have our ring coming, and then we have this shape coming, and then we have the Joker's trouser also in the same place. So this point here is an intersection, which is not good. It would be better to have this ring slightly visible there, something like that, or maybe have the ring further going up so it's not feeling uncomfortable, that it feels like almost like a mistake now. So it's good to avoid these. And even this here is a little bit too small, that negative space. So I would make sure, if I have a bit more time, I would refine these negative spaces as well to make sure that they read well. Like here we have a nice negative space. there as well, there. These are working really well. So I don't feel like there's a clashing between them. So all in all, I think with the image and the composition, we are already doing quite well. And I'm going to just very quickly show you how I would add the typography. For that, we can use the type tool. And with the type tool, we just click somewhere on the image. And then I'm going to just type in a capital S. Actually, I need to have the text selected, make it white. And then let's increase the font size to something like that. Okay, so we have the first letter there. Now I actually had another shape here, which I'm going to very quickly create in the background. So new layer, lasso tool. I'm just repeating the same things that I've done before. So I'm going a little bit faster. I'm going to create this shape. And then we can fill this on this new layer with a color, maybe using an orange. The typography, if we go back to our text layer, now has a place where we can put it. So I'm just going to place it somewhere around here. I'll just make it slightly bigger. And for this, we can also use the free transform tool. Just have to make sure you drag one of the corner points, otherwise it's going to stretch it. And by the way, whenever I'm going back and forth, so I'm redoing, undoing things, I just tap with 2 fingers, so that's undo. And with 3 fingers, you can go ahead, so that's redo. Now I'm going to duplicate this layer, and there's also another handy shortcut for that. With the touch shortcut, you just press and then drag to the side of it, and then drag the shape or the layer that you have selected. So that's a quick way of duplicating something. Let me show this again. So if you just hold down the center of the touch shortcut, with that you can constrain the movement. So that's like holding down the shift key. But if you then drag to the side, that becomes the Alt or Option key, which is to duplicate. So what I'm going to do now is to double click on the second one, and this is going to be a capital M. Then double click on the thumbnail of the third one. That's going to be an I. And then I'm just going to very quickly duplicate this 2 more times. There's one and another one. And then this one is going to be the L. And the other one is going to be, the top one is going to be E. So the reason why I created them all in separate layers, because I wanted to create this more dynamic composition on the text. So we can place the L somewhere around here, the I somewhere around there, and then the M can go somewhere around here. Now, what I want to make sure is that it will definitely read in the right order. So I don't want it to be too complicated to read. Now I would like to just create a little bit of interaction on the text, so they are not just sitting on top of these images. So first of all, maybe the M, I can move further down in the composition. And I think it would work quite nicely behind that shape. So here you can see that's quite nice. Make sure it's still legible, so don't hide it too much. I'm just going to keep one of the details behind that shape. And then what I'm going to do with the letter I is to add a mask on it. So a layer mask, use the brush tool, set the brush up, make sure it's a hard edge brush, smaller size. And then all I am going to do here is to paint over it and make it look like it's hidden under the jacket. Make it smaller as well. Yeah, something like that. And then an additional layer on top of this, clip it, and then just simply on this separate layer, we can paint over the top and keep adding on it a bit, just to create that depth effect. Yeah, something like that. So you can see it feels like the eye is under the jacket. So with little bits of tricks like these, you can create a more unique, interesting composition. And all I would do after this is to refine things and obviously add the additional text, put on a happy face on the bottom right. But essentially, these were the techniques I wanted to show you. And you can see that we could create a composition on Photoshop for iPad quite quickly and efficiently. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and share this video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever we release new videos. Click on the link on my right and start your membership today to get access to over 200 hours of training courses and personal mentoring by me and my team of creative professionals. Have fun learning, guys, and I will see you in the next one.